Welcome. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video. Basically, the idea behind it is for me to provide a bit of an introduction about myself and about the company. I found in the past when I've conducted interviews back to back, usually spend the first 5-10 minutes going through a bit of an introduction. I find it quite repetitive where I think the time is better spent actually talking to you guys and getting to know a little bit more about you, or testing for those sort of qualities or skills we're looking for. So I know it's a little bit impersonal, but hopefully the time is better spent in actually interacting rather than just me giving you a bit of background. So the idea is I'll give you background here in this recording. I can reuse it in future interviews, I suppose, and at least you come with a bit more background knowledge about the business. All right, so that's the company's MEP, Mechanical, Electrical, Plumbing, Engineering Co. Co, I suppose, consultancy company. At one point it was courses, but that's neither here nor there. It was a long time ago. It was started in August 2020. I was the founder. And about a year in, Ivan came on board, so he's the second director. So between the two of us, we run the business, and we have an equal share ownership. At the time of this recording. So we work in the building services space. I won't go into too much depth. I'm sure you can do some Googling and watch some YouTube videos if you don't know what that is. Hopefully, if you're applying for a position with the business, you understand what building services is all about. So I won't go into too much depth there. There should be plenty of information available. But essentially, it's when you're building a building, we work mostly in the commercial, residential, or like multi-occupant residential space. So you've got your architecture, your concrete walls, windows, etc. But then everything else behind all the systems, they're called building services. So you have your mechanical systems, electrical, plumbing, hydraulic, fire, communications, audio, visual, etc. So we focus in on the mechanical side, which is effectively commercial air conditioning. So it's heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC. That's the space in which we play. We specifically work, as mentioned, mechanical in the mechanical services field, and we focus on the construction side, not so much the design side, although there are design elements involved sometimes. We focus on the construction side, preparing detail engineering as well as workshop drawings for mechanical contractors. So it's kind of, you've got this big field and we're focusing on the small part. So I think I've added some slides in which gives you a bit more of a visual of what I'm talking about. All right, so here's a quick workflow of a typical construction project. So this is a construct-only contract for the mechanical contractor. So basically, where the job, let's say you're starting here on the left here, so you've got a client brief. So you got Mr. Smith, say, wants to build a 100-story or 50-story building. So he has puts together a bit of a brief. Is it a commercial building? Is it residential? Is it etc. etc.? How big is the footprint? How many floors do you want? What kind of finishes do you want, etc. So he puts together this brief of what they want, and then that generally goes to the architect. The architect at some point either engages the building services or the client directly engages them. So I won't get into too much detail, but basically you go through this design phase where there is a mechanical services design team which are involved in understanding the client's brief, specifically around what they want the air conditioning to look like. And then, or what, some people don't care, some have very specific needs. So there's a client brief on what the system needs to look like. Then the design consultant takes that, creates a schematic design. Then from there, they get client approval, goes into design development, so it gets fleshed out. And eventually, from the design phase, the output is, so the input's a client brief, and the output is a set of documentation which goes to tender, which then gets bid on by builders to construct the building. So once that tender process is completed, a builder is appointed, and under the builder, you've got different trades, mechanical being one of them. And once the project is awarded, then they go through a process of construction engineering, which is really adding the finer details in. And then from there it goes to procurement. So, items get manufactured, the equipment gets ordered, and then stuff gets installed on site. So that's the construction phase side of it. So where we get involved in is this construction engineering phase, which I've sort of highlighted here. Our main input is at this stage, which is the tender documentation, so mechanical specification and design drawings. And our main output are approved equipment schedules and shop drawings. So it's really taking the design drawings and converting them into workshop drawings. So a workshop drawing, effectively, I'm sure most of you probably bought some IKEA furniture in the past. So imagine when you get, you open up the box, there's a piece of paper there with different pictures and sort of steps on how to assemble things. So that's effectively what we're doing in our business, is we're preparing those instruction drawings or shop drawings for the guys on site to install mechanical services, so air conditioning systems. So the design drawings are usually, just anecdotally, would say they're 80-70% there, so they convey the design intent, but they're usually not detailed enough for you to be able to order materials and then manufacture from. So that's where we come in. We add the details in, and we get it to a point where it can be manufactured. When I say approved equipment schedules, again, mechanical specification sort of tells you, I want, I don't know, if we use a phone, for example, they'll say, I want a phone it's got 5G, it's got X amount of gigabytes of storage, it's got X amount of pixels of camera, etc. And then we will then go to the market and find suppliers. It might be a Samsung, it might be an iPhone, it might be whatever. And then generally on the contractor side, most things are driven by price. So you see what's the best fit price-wise, generally, as I mentioned, that meets the specifications provided by the design team. So that's what's involved here. Just give it a bit of an analogy. What it means by our outputs are approved equipment. So we go through and find equipment that meets the specification, and then we get the drawings and we detail them up to a point where they can be manufactured from. That's effectively where we fit in. So larger companies who you're probably aware of, people like ACOM and Arup and WSB and sort of those big consultancies, this is where they get involved in. So they're involved in this design phase, and then whereas we're involved in this construction phase mostly. We do work on both sides, as if things come up, but we don't chase that kind of work. But naturally, as we build our client base, we do get people who ask us to get involved with design on the design side, and we do that on occasion. But most of our work and our target clients are in this construction space. Yeah. So this next slide just gives a little bit more, kind of zooms into that one step. I think the previous one I just said construction engineering, so I've sort of blown it up a bit more. So equipment selection and submittals, design checks. So again, generally because the design teams are quite rushed, or they're not, or the information is not complete, we need to go through and do a bit of a check, find errors, discrepancies, address them, and then get the information ready for the shop drawings. So the other point I was going to make, if I just go back to the previous slide. So the construction industry in Victoria, in Australia at least, it's almost like a pyramid. So at the top you've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which are kind of the top tiers. And then it's sort of, there's no formal, it's kind of an informal system where the tier 1s are kind of the biggest companies that do the biggest projects, most complex projects. So they'd be like tier 1 companies. You've got tier 2, tier 3, and then you've got everyone else sort of down the bottom. The guys at the top, tier 1, generally have their own in-house engineering teams and in-house shop drawing teams. So we do work with tier 1 companies, but I'd say our target market's probably tier 2, who are just they're big enough to do some good projects, but they don't have enough. They haven't invested in building an in-house team. So that's kind of where we come in as a bolt-on engineering and drafting team. So I said that's our sweet spot, those tier 2, tier 3 type companies. But we also work with tier 1 companies, but generally at the moment, for those guys, it's just overflow work, where when they're too busy or they need a bit of extra support, they would then overflow some of the work to us. So that's where we're at the moment. I would say in the long term, on the drafting side, we're definitely targeting to be a partner of choice for the tier 1 companies on the drafting side. On the engineering side, at least in the near term, I still see us focusing on the tier 2. Potentially in a year or two, maybe 3. Once we streamline our engineering and drafting offering into a I'll talk about that in a little bit more in what I call a hybrid model. Once we sort of get that streamlined, eventually our goal is to be more attractive to these companies to use us rather than use their in-house team. So that's quite ambitious. But that's something which we're working towards in the medium term. So that's 3-5 years. All right. Carry on back to this. So I think I've gone through this already. So they're the kind of steps: equipment selection, design checks, markups for drafting, and then shop drawings. So generally engineering. So in our business, we're split into an engineering team and a drafting team, and that's pretty standard across the industry on the construction side. Even on the design side, I think they've got engineers and then design sort of drafters. That's how we are set up at the moment as well. There's an engineering team, design team, drafting team rather. The engineering on this chart here, the engineering team is responsible for these 2 steps, and the shop drawings are by the drafters. Eventually, we do see it becoming a bit of a hybrid role, but that's down the track. I guess a bit more about our business. So this is a business org chart. 2 directors, so that's myself here on the right-hand side. So I'm more responsible for business development, finance, admin. I also get involved in project work, but that's more Ivan's jurisdiction. So we're probably like 70-30. So he does 70% of project delivery, and I probably support the 30% capacity, and vice versa. I'm in charge of 70% business development, and he helps in the 30% capacity. So that's the top tier management structure. Beyond that, there's really we're pretty flat at the moment in terms of management structure. Really, just the 2 of us. Eventually, there will be, as the teams grow, we'll need some middle management, things like that. On the engineering side, that's the team at the moment. On the drafting side, we're set up in pods. So we've got 2 pods, which essentially working full time on our projects, and then we've got a freelance crew who we use for overflow. That's a bit of an overview of the number of people in the org chart at the moment at the time of this recording. A bit of a quick photo from our 2022 end of year breakfast. So you put some faces to the names. I'll just go to the next slide. Why? Right. Why am I? Right. Okay. So why are we looking for graduates? We have some pretty ambitious plans in terms of where we want to see the business grow, get to, or the level of service we want to provide our customers. And being a service business, we don't sell physical material things. We're selling a service, which is essentially engineering and drafting. It really is only as good as the people who we have on the team. So we are quite focused on investing in our people, and so that means the people we have on staff at the moment, we focus on upskilling them, training them, getting them the best that they can be, as well as any new people we bring on board. We need to be very careful in who we select, and we always aim to get the top available talent out there. Right. So it is a little bit. It is a little bit difficult to get onto the team because we do have quite a high standard of who comes on. So that's, I'll leave it there for now. All right, so as mentioned, quite ambitious, and the level of service we want to deliver, it really is people-based. So, if we win more projects, we can only deliver them by adding more people on board. So at the moment, from the previous chart, you could see we're sort of in 20, 25, haven't counted in a while. But in the next 5 years or so, we need to get to be about 94 highly effective people to sort of achieve the target or the level of service which we're trying to achieve. So we do projects Australia-wide at the moment. But we are based in Melbourne, so that's where we're based. I'd say most of our people are around here, but we do work remotely. So we've got people in Sydney, Mildura. We do work in New Zealand, in Brisbane, Sydney, Tasmania. So all across Australia, but the bulk of it is in Melbourne at the moment. But in sort of 2028, we see ourselves working with tier ones pretty much across the whole continent as well as New Zealand. We want to be working with all tier ones, and that's easily attainable once we get our drafting team built up to a point where we've got that capacity and volume and depth of support where we can take on as much work as people are willing to give us. Yeah, right. So point being, we're highly ambitious. We need a lot of people. So there's two. Our strategy is sort of, we've got a, it's, if we're very short-sighted, just looking short-term, it's easiest for us to hire experienced people because I still class as a smaller company, so everyone needs to be effective from day dot. Whereas graduates are very expensive and takes a long time to bring people up to speed. So without looking long-term, it's a lot easier to hire experienced people and operate with people who know what they're doing. However, that's very short-sighted and you won't last very long. You kind of have to have a bit of flow, especially you need to invest in the next generation, and that's something which we're keen on. And our strategy is to have a strong top end, so you've got a good depth of experts, and we have a good strong team at the moment where the guys at the top, they're very experienced guys. I'd say top of the field in the industry in both engineering and drafting. And now we're trying to also focus on bringing in people, the very best, I guess, graduates, or that we're trying to solve that problem. How do we attract the best talent in the industry or in the, coming out of university, so that they come in, learn rapidly, and suck up all that knowledge from this rich bank of experts at the moment, and then over time bridge that gap. So we've got people at the top end, people at the bottom end, and then over the next 2, 3, 5 years, we'll fill in that range because the people coming in will learn quickly and sort of fill the sort of gap. Hopefully that's making sense. I'm visualizing in my head, but I'm kind of doing hand gestures. Anyway, we'll carry on. So a team building strategy, I just described that. All right, so what are the entry points? As mentioned, there are two sort of technical entry points in our business. That's at the moment via engineering or via drafting. And eventually, long term, we'll be looking at developing this hybrid type of role, which is essentially both skills combined. At the moment, engineering, so this reflects what's happening out there in the industry, in the construction industry at large. So mostly on the construction side, all the tier one contractors would generally have their own in-house engineering and drafting teams. The engineering guys are degree qualified, typically. Always degree, I'd say 99% of the time have a professional engineering degree, whereas the drafting guys, some engineers do end up in the drafting side, but the formal pathway at the moment is through an apprenticeship. But you do have a lot of engineers who end up in the drafting side, either because they couldn't get their foot in to the engineering side, or they just enjoy the type of work that's done in drafting. I personally, I started engineering, but as we're building the business, I'm getting more exposed to drafting, and I'm realizing it's actually just as interesting, if not more, in some instances. And it's definitely requires a high skill set understanding. So, hence why I think it needs to be a hybrid, and that's what we're trying to. I think once we're able to crack this, that's where we get the edge and can really push into. I think I mentioned earlier that drafting definitely will be in that tier one space, working on those really good projects. But engineering wise, there's really little advantage we provide at the moment to the tier ones, except for overflow support in terms of resourcing. But I think once we get to this point and we've got the skill set across the two, that'll really give us the edge, and we can really sort of provide an offering to them, which will be attractive. I'm not sure if any of that makes sense, but hopefully it does. Anyway. All right, so entry points, engineering. So the engineers are generally responsible for design checks, calculations, equipment selection, and then sketches, which go into drafting. So this is kind of the coming back to the hybrid, that's where I see a point potential for efficiency, because to do these sketches, it actually takes time. It's yes, it's not as long as it takes to actually draft it in 3 dimensions or in Revit, but you still spend quite a good, a sufficient amount of time doing this if you're going to do it to any level accuracy. So the missing link is that it takes a long time to learn this skill of how to use the software effectively. So if we can find an effective way of training our engineers, then they can prepare the engineering sketches or the preliminary LOD sort of 100, 200 information in Revit directly, saving a step. So these guys don't have to, like, essentially you're removing some double handling. And then the drafting role can then be relegated to more just detailing and annotation rather than actually modeling. So effectively what I'm saying with the hybrid role, this bit here moves up into engineering. And then the drafting side is more detailing annotation, which is a little bit more just repetitive, and there's still a bit of thinking, very critical thinking required, but it's not as you can simplify that a lot. Anyway, so that's the vision for the hybrid role. At the moment, they are separate in terms of entry points. They are the 2 entry points into our business, into our company. And any graduates, I would be looking at people who, if we had a pick, I'd be looking at people who can fit this hybrid role. Again, looking for that long-term vision. However, I do understand. Obviously, it's a two-part. Two parties involved. Obviously, there's us and then yourself. So you need to make sure that's a good fit for both sides, rather than just forcing our view. All right, carry on. So here's an example of the output from an engineer. This is an engineering sketch. This then goes to drafting. So in this case, you've got a fan here sketched in orange, some ductwork, some attenuators. So all this information is provided by the engineer, and then this goes to the drafting team, who then prepare shop drawings. So this is a shop drawing. You can see it's a lot more accurate. Everything is dimensioned accurately. And this can be sent to, there's enough information here. At least it's starting to get enough information where this can be sent to a duct shop, and they can manufacture the ductwork or order the fans, etc. So this doesn't show all the information, but it's starting to, it's in progress. You can see the difference: engineering sketch, shop drawing. So it doesn't seem like that big a deal, and it actually does take quite a while to prepare the sketch to some level of accuracy. So if the skill set was there to do it in Revit already, that would save that step. So you could model it in, and then the drafters would then just have to annotate dimensions and tags and things like that. So that's what we're thinking. Anyway, carry on. Sample Revit files. So I'll escape this. So to show you what a larger project looks like. So I guess if we're trying to market this to you, I suppose you could call it digital engineering, which is sort of the new buzzword. So that's preparing the designs in a BIM environment, so building information modeling. So it's 3D, the 3 dimensions. Even some companies, I suppose, work in 4D, where the time elements, they can see how things are staged and constructed. But for our purposes, we're just modeling in 3 dimensions. This here are all the mechanical services on this particular project. I've tried to, the information is still visible. Yeah, I'll try and blow that out, because I'm not sure I'm meant to be sharing this, but anyway. I think that I just wanted to show this to sort of give you an idea of the level of complexity. I'm not particularly good at navigating Revit, as you can see. But someone's job was to prepare this and to then detail it to a point where it can be manufactured. So as an engineer, you'd be looking at, checking the airflows and the duct sizes and, fan statics and calculating fans required, etc. And as a shop drafter or drafter, you'd be drawing this in 3 dimensions, and then getting it ready to shop drawings, so 2D drawings detailed enough so that someone can manufacture it and also then install it on site. So just give you a bit of a visual of what a job looks like. This is a more complex job. It's like a tier 1 type job. The lower tiers, tier 2, tier 3, they don't even draw in 3D sometimes, although we, as a rule, prefer to draw in Revit. All right, so where were we? Continue on. All right. So this is a little bit of a sales pitch. What I mean by that is I'll do a bit of a segue. So I always I always thought of sales as a negative thing. I guess when someone said sales, I'd pictured sort of a sleazy used car salesman, which is kind of and I think for me, sorry about that. I'm alive. Right. Segue. Used car salesman. Right. So, when I started business, it wasn't something I thought I'd be good at. This is the whole sales thing, but uh, identified as a skill I was missing. So I had a choice: either hire someone to do it or learn it myself. And my philosophy is to sort of learn as much as I can myself to at least have service information so that I can manage others when I need to. For example, with Revit, initially I was like, let me not dive into the detail. Let's trust other people. However, it's very difficult to manage something you don't understand. So I try to at least understand from a high level of what I'm doing, so that's easier to manage others and understand the limitations and opportunities available. Anyway, again, segue. My point being was I needed to learn about sales. And in doing that, actually, now I tend to enjoy it because I realize really what you're doing is you're solving a problem. And you're not trying to rip people off as such. You're trying to, it's effectively a transaction. So someone has a need and you have something that you can help them with, and vice versa. So you need to get to and it's essentially you're trading something. So I have something to offer you and you have something to offer us, and you have to understand what the value of what you're offering is, and vice versa. And generally people value things differently. So you have to get to a point where you've got this equation. I don't know how you describe it. I haven't really thought this through, so I'm sort of rambling. But basically, you want, if you imagine as a seesaw, sketch. Right, there we go. Whoop, there we go. So if we imagine this as a seesaw, so we'll say this is you, and this is buyer, or the other way around. Probably the other way around. Gonna be messy. There we go. Yeah. You want it to be this way. So you've got all these little things you're stacking. So these are the things I'm offering. So this is you're giving all these things so that, and then the buyer's giving you that. We should have done it in a different color. Whatever. All right. So here's you. This is what you're getting back. So he's giving you these things, and you're giving him these things. So you always need to stack this equation so that the buyer is getting more than what you're getting from their perspective. And then when you flip it in the other direction, it needs to be, I'm not sure if I'm explaining this correctly, but so from your perspective, you need the equation to be in favor of the buyer. And from the buyer's perspective, he needs the equation to be in favor of you. And the way that works is essentially you guys are assigning different value to different things. So for example, in this case, if we're using this as a, let's say you the graduate and me by the employer. For example, something that might be very important for you guys, you might weigh, especially senior staff, is flexibility. So let's say they assign that 100 points. So being able to work whatever hours they want or whatever days or etc. Right? So people value that quite a bit. But as an employer, I don't really care too much. It's kind of like long as the work's produced. I don't care if you work, 5 hours or 10 hours or, on a Saturday or a Monday, whatever, right? So from my perspective, the value I assign to that's quite low. So I can give you as much of that flexibility as you want, and for you that's quite valuable, right? So it's kind of assigning complete segue here. So although on your scale this thing might not be high, on my scale it is quite high. So that's how this sort of equation works, right? Where it needs to be balanced in a way that from your perspective, the buyer it's leaning towards the buyer, and then from the buyer's perspective, leaning towards you. So it sounds like a sort of catch-22. But once you understand the dynamic that people value things differently, that's how you can sort of get that equation sitting for both people. Anyway, I'll I'll leave this in there. Some might find this useful, but anyway, point being, I don't know how I even got here. I think I've always just wanted to describe my philosophy in sales. I'll leave that in there just for a bit of fun. Anyway, I'll carry on. So, in this case, I'm trying to sell you to come and work for us, and from your perspective, you're trying to sell yourself for us to hire you, right? So it's kind of, we're both trying to sell each other, and generally the dynamic is dynamic is, it can sway either way. So sometimes in the negotiation we can have an advantage, and sometimes you have the advantage. So I remember when I was looking for work after I graduated, I did not feel any power whatsoever in the negotiation side. However, now that I'm on this side, I realize the candidates very often do. However, I've said however how many times. It really is, you only get the power when you're sort of, here's another thing I'll sketch, a little segue. So my assumption is, if this is a bit of a bell curve of, I don't know, performance versus people. This is performance, I'll just call it P. This is the number of people. No. Messed it up. The other end. Call this N, number of people, and performance. So I guess that's the average. Most people are kind of in the average area, and then you got a few people who are in the top, whatever, 10, 20%. So I would say if you study engineering in Australia, usually you need like an ATAR of, I don't know, 80, 90. So let's say, for argument's sake, you got 20%. So you're already in the top 20. And then these guys then go into engineering. And it's the same chart again. The graduates. And what I'm trying to say is we're looking for, say, the top 10% of people. And how do we define that top 10% is a challenge, and I'll try and go through that in a few slides. It's not necessarily by marks, or it's more, we'll get to that in a second. How did I get to this base? Segue, right. What I was trying to say was, it's quite a, from our perspective, we're trying to find not a needle in a haystack, but you're already looking at a very small proportion of the population, and then you take those guys, so now you've got these are the guys that study engineering. Then you go into here, and then you're kind of looking at the top 10% of graduates, and then you also then narrow it down to the specific mechanical field. So the pool of people available gets a lot smaller. So what I was trying to get to was, from a negotiation point of view, if you find yourself in this category, you actually have quite a lot of negotiating power, because you are rare and there aren't many of you around. So that's what a lot of businesses and companies are fighting for, as well as us, as I mentioned. For us to build our business is solely dependent on good people. So these are the people we're looking for, and they're rare. So if you find yourself lucky to be in this position, I wouldn't say lucky, but because generally it's not by luck, you've done work to get to that point. If you find yourself in that point, you do have a lot of negotiating power. However, if you're in here, then not so much. Then we have all the negotiating power, right? So it's kind of, again, I don't know how I got to this segue. I'll just this will be on YouTube, so you can skip ahead or whatever as you might want. Anyway, all right. So let's continue with our slide. So what this was all about is what we can offer you and why our sort of our big offer to you guys, right? I'm a little bit biased, but I would say in your first few years of a career, it's a lot more important for you to be in an environment where you can learn. That's the greatest value that you can have, is investing in yourself and learning quickly. Focus on that, and the financial side will take care of itself down the track. Generally, your first job's quite difficult to get, but then after that, you're in such high demand. You can almost write your own check, especially in this environment we are at the moment. It's quite, I would say, it's stuff. It's more. It's pretty late. My mind's a bit fried, but it's more. Once you've got experience under your belt and you've proven yourself capable, you're in a lot better negotiating position. So focus on learning some good skills and becoming competent and building a network so people know that you're competent. Usually it's a pretty small industry. Most people know themselves, especially as you go higher up the pyramid and you're sort of at the top tier. Most people know each other at that stage. So if you're good, everyone knows, and if you're not good, everyone knows. So it's kind of double-edged sword. I'd say focus on learning and becoming the best that you can be in your early years of your career. And what I'm trying to say effectively is we value the training and the learning, and we invest in training our guys. In fact, we have a dedicated resource or member on the team whose job it is solely to provide technical support and training to the younger guys. So that's something I would say second to none in the industry. It's very rarely that you'd have the level of investment into training young people that we put into our guys. There is a selfish element to that, because the more competent you guys are, the less time we need to spend managing you guys and supporting you guys on a job-to-job basis. So we invest heavily up front to train you guys up, with the idea that we're trying to get you to independence as soon as possible. So thought I'd just highlight that. All right. Work with industry experts. As mentioned, our strategy is to have the top layer very strong. So everyone who hires comes from a construction background and a tier 1 background. At least that's been the case so far. We haven't had to deviate from that plan. So there's a strong and a lot of depth of good people in the team who you can draw from. So what we expect from you is to be able to learn quickly and access that information and absorb that information. So it might have taken, say, me 3-5 years to learn something, but trying to condense that information for you so you can learn the same thing in a shorter period of time. So that's what we're looking for. Me, at least, is people who can learn quickly. And if it's taking me 5 years, I expect it to take you 3 years or 2 years or even less. In fact, I'm aiming for 12 weeks for people to become productive. Anyway, I digress. Work with industry experts. Top tier construction projects. So as mentioned, we're working in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Engineering wise, we're targeting sort of the tier 2 area. Drafting, we're working towards in the tier 1. So that's kind of so tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is kind of where we operate. So you can look through our LinkedIn page. I think we've updated our website and the projects recently, so you can have a quick look, see some of the projects which we're working on. Flexibility and working from home. So I put this here as a positive, but I'll be honest with you. In your position as someone starting green, this is actually a negative, because working from home, you're not as saturated with the like passive knowledge, which you just get from just the osmosis of being in an environment with 10 people working around you, because you can sort of learn from others and hear, see what challenges others are working with and what's generally happening in the industry, and all that passive information you're missing. So we do have measures in place which we try to account for in the way we work. As mentioned, we've got a dedicated resource. We've got a lot of recorded videos and training archives and things like that. So we are trying to compensate for that. However, this does become a big positive once you are at a level where you're competent, you can work by yourself. So yeah, so there's that side of it. We do have an office, and there is the option to work from the office as much as you want. However, at the moment, most senior people take the flexibility option and only go in the office once a week on a Friday. So Fridays is definitely everyone needs to be in the office again for that sort of camaraderie and building rapport and sort of getting that natural team bonding happening. Obviously, if you don't live in Melbourne, then once we get enough people in whatever state you're in, then we'll set up a regular office day in those areas as well. As mentioned, you do have the flexibility to go in the office as much as you want. However, there aren't that many people taking up that option at the moment, so it might not, like, you really are working from home most of the time. All right, remuneration. So this is I'll do a bit of a segue and I'll share a chart which I prepared previously. I haven't looked at it for a while, so I might ramble a bit, but so we're fairly transparent with, I haven't actually presented this to the team at the time of this recording, but we're fairly transparent with how we, our remuneration package. So basically, once you get to what we call a project engineer level, which is you can work independently and you can run your own projects, then you get access to a bonus scheme. So the way that works is you have a target, let's call it 100%. If you get to 120% of your target, then you're qualified for up to a 20% bonus. So, and of that, that's actually broken up into two parts. So first 10% is guaranteed. So that's based on your individual performance. If you go more than, if you get to 110%, that 10% is guaranteed. And then beyond that, so that from 110 to 120, that is then dependent on company-wide performance. So essentially so if everyone else gets more than 100%, then usually you have access to your full 20%. It's basically first 10% is yours. Again, I'm rambling. And then anything beyond that, we just need to make sure there aren't any holes company-wide before it gets paid out to individuals. So individual target, team target. Hopefully that makes sense. And the reason we've done that is to encourage ownership from individuals, to sort of be upfront with you. We have aligned our incentives. Basically, in the traditional model, everyone's on the same team until it comes time to discuss or negotiate salaries, right? So you're working together on the project and you're sort of working, serving your clients, etc. But then it comes time to negotiate salaries, and then for the employer to do well, the employee needs to get paid less and vice versa. So it's kind of, that becomes a conflict. However, what we've done is we've structured it in a way that for the company to do well, the employee needs to, for the company to do well, the employee needs to do well, vice versa. I'll leave it there. I won't get too much into the details, but lots of segues. Hopefully you're learning a little bit about me. I like segues. Right, so what we've got here is on the x-axis is time in years, and on the y-axis is dollar value, right? So the blue line is a base salary. I've labeled that as ambitious. So this is actually based on my trajectory through my career. Fairly steep, I would say, compared to the average. I assume the average is this red line. So you might start at, say, 55 or 60, whatever that is. And then over, say, 10 years, you might get to 115. And then, so I'd say that's like average, below average. But then the top tier people, generally you cap out at around 150. If all you're doing is purely engineering, not doing any management, not doing any sort of, I don't know what else you'd be doing, but purely as an engineer or a drafter, that's kind of your upper limit in today's currency. But what I'm saying is, if this is sort of this is definitely achievable. So I've corrected this for inflation, but this is achievable. But what we want to see is people go even steeper, right? So they're the kind of people we're looking for, people who are keen to go steeper. However, that comes at a cost, a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of self-drive. You need to be pretty switched on to achieve that. So that's we're not looking for people who are going to go on the average path. That's I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that's kind of a personal preference. Anyway, I feel like I'm off on a tangent. Yeah. I think I'll stop it there remuneration wise. So just a quick, so the reason I added this green one here is so that you can see, so this is from a business return. So being a, effectively it's a service business, all we're selling is labor. So there is from a business perspective, commercial perspective, I mean, there are a couple of different ways, but one of the ways is pure labor. So if you sell someone's time at, say, $100 an hour, then 20 bucks of that goes towards the business, etc. So in this case, it's this chart. This green line shows what the business return is, and the reason I've added that in is to sort of show you that what I mentioned earlier on. It's a lot like if you look at the maximum amount of income that the business can earn is best by hiring the experienced people straight away. They know what they're doing, requires less management. They're productive. Yeah, so it's easier from a short-term perspective commercially to hire experienced people. When you hire a graduate or someone in training, it's actually extremely expensive. Not just in the time, the fact that you're paying them a salary and they're not productive. You got all the hardware, all that side of things, but it's more the time cost, opportunity cost of people who would otherwise be working on projects who are now engaged in training others. Hence why I think it's important to not be selfish and just hire experienced people, which that's something we can do. I think it's important to invest in the next generation of engineers. However, it comes at a cost. Hence why our criteria to do that, again, I don't know if this is going to be successful, but our criteria to do that is to make sure that people we hire can learn very quickly and achieve competency in a short time frame. Because we need to go from negative to positive very quickly. Otherwise, it's just not scalable. As mentioned, we need a lot of people. Imagine, if you put 10 people on and they're all negative, it's just not going to be great, right? Whereas if you put 10 people on and they're positive straight away, that's good. So there's a limiting factor there. Just again, giving you a little bit of a insight behind the scenes of what goes through our mind when we make these decisions. The other reason I like the graduates is generally my assumption is people are hungrier when they're starting their career. And I had some other notes here. Let's see if I can bring it up. So I think the main thing is people are hungrier. Yeah, they're energetic, plus I mentioned we're looking to sort of develop that hybrid model, which requires you have to train people in using Revit. So if we're getting these people and try and train them in Revit, it's going to be quite expensive. Whereas if we did all the training plan for the younger guys straight off the bat, then they can fit into this hybrid role from the start. So that's part of the logic there. However, the downfall is people who generally learn very steeply, they're not just going to want to get to this point and then stop. They're going to want to, they get bored. They want the next challenge. So, and that's something I understand. And I prefer that challenge of how do you keep people engaged rather than someone who's sort of, he prefers a bit of a slower, steady pace. Again, I'm being very clear on what our expectations are, and you need to be honest with yourself if that's something that you want to step up to and work towards, because it's not easy. It requires a lot of hard work, dedication, sacrifice, and you need to be driven to want that high performance, high octane path, right? All right. I think I have said enough on that point. I think this part here is, yes, it's possible to go beyond this 150, but at that point, so this is more working, average week. You've got sort of good efficiency, whereas over here, you really need to start working on leverage somehow to find. I'll just leave it at that, and you're probably working crazy hours as well. So that's sort of, yeah, it is possible to do more, but anyway. But generally, like I said, you get to that point, you're looking for something else, either management role or some sort of a design manager, or you're taking on some more responsibility, or maybe sales. So you're not just a pure operator / delivery person. All right, enough of that rant. This has gone for an hour. If you're still here, thank you very much. Let's continue. You're obviously interested if you're still here after 50 minutes. All right, next one, training budget. So as mentioned, we're very invested in bringing you people up to speed. So we have a lot of internal training resources, but we also have allocated budget for external things. So whether that be a membership to something like a CIBSI or an ERA, or if you want to go to like a seminar or some sort of training course or whatever it might be, there is a budget of 2,000 allocated per annum. Advancement opportunities. So being a growing company, as mentioned, we're going from something like 2025 to 90 plus in the next 5 years, and with more scale requires more structure, which means a few more management roles, a few more different types of positions, jobs which are being done by sort of one person might be wearing multiple hats. Eventually, might split that into actual separate roles. So there's a lot of opportunity to design your career around. So if you tell us early where you see yourself going, if there's a need in the business and we can align that, we can easily. Essentially, there's lots of room for career development within the company. I would say with us compared to someone like an ACOM or Arab or one of those big machines where you're just going to be a little wheel in a big machine. Here you will have the capacity to grow very quickly, and we encourage that, in fact. So we're looking for those people who are highly ambitious and who don't want to be restricted, who are self-driven. All right, so that's there. Now, so if you remember what I've mentioned about that equation, the balance, so I've explained to you what we can offer you guys. Now I'm explaining what we're hoping to get from you guys. The biggest thing from my perspective is leverage, right? So the output needs to be a lot bigger than the input. I enjoy talking and explaining things to people, as you can tell, probably, maybe. But I also have a pretty short fuse, and I get frustrated when I shut down pretty quickly if I can see that the information is, if your eyes are sort of glazing over, absorbing information quick enough, or there's no output, there's no response, there's no feedback, I very quickly shut down, which is a personal flaw or shortfall or shortcoming. However, that's the way I operate at the moment. Yeah, I enjoy giving a lot, but if I'm not seeing the returns, then I tend to shut off. So there's that expectation. Anyway, coming back to this, the main thing here, if I had to summarize it, if you remember that original first slide, I don't know if I can go back. This one here. So if we went input, so once the project is won, we usually do a handover from our sales team to the operations team. That usually takes about 15-20 minutes. So my ideal point is if we can do that handover, and then you produce the output with very minimal input or support checkpoints from others. Essentially, you're delivering the project work independently. If you can do that in the shortest, so average person probably takes 2-3 years to get there. If you can do that in 3 to 6 months, that's what we're looking for, right? You get to that level of independence where you understand the context, you know the rules of the game, we explain to you what you're trying to get to, and then you figure out how to get there with the tools you have. So that's kind of that's the ideal scenario, right? We understand you're not going to fill every gap instantly, but you have the core items in place, and you know who to go to get information from, suppliers or textbooks or literature or the dedicated support person in house, and we have the confidence that whatever you've done has been done correctly. So that's the sort of ideal. Where are we? Yes, so that's the ideal scenario. So after sort of 12 weeks, you've gained independence. So if you look back, if you at the other chart we looked at before, it's kind of that you're no longer in that negative. You've come up. I'm going to show it. So that's this bit here. This is drawn as a 12-week point. So you've gone from here to here, where you've understood all the fundamentals, and you are then ready to sort of start tackling the growth cycle on your own. Well, yeah, there's still people around to help you, but you're independent. Yeah, you can be assigned a project and you can deliver it with minimal sort of hand-holding. I'm rambling, saying the same thing over and over again. All right. So that's the key metric. So when I'm talking to you guys, or that's kind of what I'm trying to watch out for. That's a skill I don't really have at the moment. At the time of recording this, but that's something I need to develop. And the way I develop things is through repetition, so lots of reps. Hence why I'll get to it in a second, but I've got my calendar open certain spots weekly to allow for lots of interviews. As mentioned, I'm being perfectly open with you guys, so you guys know your chances. It's kind of that 10%, as mentioned, potentially. But I'm setting all the criteria out so that you know exactly what we're looking for and what we're trying to achieve. And I'm hoping that you can then gives you the best chance of presenting yourself in a way that will give us the confidence. Because essentially, when you're hiring a graduate, it's a gamble. They haven't got industry experience to showcase the fact that they know what they're doing. So you're gambling on the fact that they've shown enough promise that they can deliver or work effectively. Anyway, all right, ambitious and high energy individuals. So that's a key thing. To be able to scale this mountain very quickly, you need a lot of energy, a lot of ambition. And proxy metrics. So things which I've thought about, what are the markers of the right person who should be able to achieve what I've described here? Effectively, I'll give you a few of the rules, show you some resources, point in the right direction, explain to you what we're trying to get to, and then you can get there by yourself. So I believe these are some of the soft skills which such a person needs to portray. The communication is quite important. Not necessarily, what I mean by that is your ability to talk to people in written form, in verbal form, to sort of listen, to observe and understand, all right, what's the end goal here? Like sometimes you sit in a meeting and you can see people are just not on the right track or missing things. I don't know how you describe that, but that's sort of that level of communication we're talking about. So understanding what the aim of the game is, and then being observant of what everyone else is doing, making sure that they're on the same track, and then making sure you provide the right input in the right spots so that everyone's on the same track to get to where you need to get to. All right. I'll be very sad if this recording doesn't record properly. Spent a lot of time on this. Anyway, sometimes these recordings don't upload properly. All right, next one, strives for excellence. So what I mean by this is you need to be looking for like attention to detail, but also looking to achieve the best that you can. My path mark I was thinking of putting together a bit of a training module, which I still might, but I was going to set the pass mark at 100%. Some people might think, oh, that's a bit ambitious or not realistic. I know at uni or whatever, it might be 80%, not even 80. I don't know what the pass mark is, 50%. I don't know how that's acceptable in this day. I mean, at that level, I suppose it's more generic type knowledge, but when you're down to the specifics, let's say you're producing a shop drawing, it's going to take $1 million to manufacture all this stuff. So are you saying anything less than 100% is acceptable? I would say no. Can you imagine I go to the client, he's like, here's $1 million worth of work, we'll go prepare the drawings and it's 90% accurate. That means $100,000 worth of rework. How do you think our client will feel when we say, oh, no, it's 90%, that's good enough? No, acceptable, 100%. So what I mean by that is, I guess to clarify, and there always will be mistakes, and we understand that. However, the mistakes, your lack of understanding or technical knowledge or stuff within your control should not contribute to those mistakes. So if we do a bit of the train, like for example, this training module I was talking about, if it's a theoretical thing or to explain how the reason behind things or why you're doing things, if you don't understand those, and then you're going into a complex environment where there's so many moving parts and your fundamental understanding is lacking, that's just gonna create, it's a recipe for disaster, right? So that's what I mean. Things within your own control, your own self-understanding and knowledge, you need to try and achieve excellence in those components, because when you go into a multi-team environment, there's so many variables around that are going to cause a risk for errors that you don't want your own sort of baseline to be one of those. Hopefully that made sense. All right. So that's one of our core values. Actually, most of these are our core values. So we've got communication, excellence. All right. Next one, self-driven. So we want to hire adults. We're not here to hold your hand, and we don't essentially, we're not here to hold your hand. You're here to contribute to the team and sort of help us all on our mission, right? No one's sort of getting dragged along as a helpless person. You're coming on to sort of help the team. That's effectively what that's there. Critical thinking, I define that by asking lots of how and why questions. And that's very important, because there's no point just doing things like, oh, why did you do that? Oh, X and X told me to do it. Like, you just follow. You're not a mindless robot, right? There's lots of apps and automation and things like that, which make things simpler. And if it was as simple as not having to engage your brain, we would go down that path. So part of the value you bring to organization like ours is your ability to think and use your brain to ask how questions, why questions, and then figure out the shortest path to a solution. So I'll give you a quick graphic. So let's say this is your starting point, this is the end point, and then the guy who trains you is, I don't know, 30 years experience, and he says, oh, you got to do this, take a left, take a right, take a left back, and then go this way. But the reason he's done this is because back in the day when he was starting or he was learning, there was an obstacle here. However, now there's Chat GPT and there's lots of AI and whatever else. So this obstacle is not there anymore. So rather than you mindlessly following the same path, you need to be asking why. What am I doing? What am I trying to achieve? Because you can just, very often there'll be lots of opportunities to just do that. So you need to understand the why behind things. Don't just do things aimlessly and mindlessly, because it happens a lot. It's like, yeah, why did you, prepare that schedule? Oh, he asked me to do it. Did you understand why you're doing it? Did you there's a lot, like, you really need to be asking the why and the how. So this is very important. And it's probably if I look at this is probably I would say this part here is what tips you over the edge and into that 10%. So this is talking about this chart again. So the average person might be here, is very hardworking, but without this, you're not really going to end up in this top tier. This is a key thing we're looking for. Problem solving, being resourceful, thinking outside the box, understanding, all right, this is the goal. There's an obstacle here, X and X has told me to go this way, but I can go that way, or, just being creative problem solving. So I guess this is a skill you can develop. Like all of these are skills you can develop, but this is something that we're looking for. Quick learner, again, speed is everything. I've explained to you how investing in a graduate from a business perspective in the short term is a big loss. So we need to reduce, like, you've got a leak, you've got to reduce that leak as quickly as possible. To do that, this is in your own power to learn quickly. Hardworking, again, you think back to the chart I showed before, we're not looking for the average sort of path, we're looking for a very steep learning curve and to learn quickly. All right, next. So, do you fit the bill? If you do, If you think you do, here is a link. I've allocated some spots in my calendar. Book yourself in for an interview and let's have a chat. Hopefully that has been useful. Hopefully I haven't come across too arrogant or demanding. Yeah, I think if I look back, when I first started the business, I sort of wanted to go down two paths. One was this, what I've done now with the contracting side, but I also wanted to address this. I had this idea in my head that there's a lot of demand in the industry for experienced engineers, and there are a lot of graduates, but there's a big gap between the graduates and the actual experienced people, and no one wants to invest in the training and the opportunity to get these guys up to speed. So I always wanted to fill that gap. However, when I started, I realized it wasn't commercially viable. Well, short term anyway. I had a family to feed, so I sort of focused on the revenue generating work. But now our business is at a point where we can give this a crack. As mentioned, it's a lot easier for us and a lot more commercially viable to go straight and hire experienced people. However, I think there's a lot of value in the next generation of engineers and investing in them. So we genuinely want to give opportunities for people to come on board. However, have to be realistic. If we get the wrong people, very quickly we'll tank. So I am generally quite empathetic, and it's very difficult for me to say no to people. I think that's why I'm invested this time in sort of very, very clearly outlining what we're looking for, explain the reasons behind our decision making, etc., so that if you do get a no, you understand why that is. Plus, a no doesn't mean like no forever, right? You have the blueprint, you can go work on yourself, you can go and get up to the point where you can prove that you've got these quick learning, you've got the critical thinking, etc. by implementing, by getting yourself up to get your starting point. Had the first interview, not quite the level we need to be. Come back 4 weeks later, and here these are the things I've done, bang, 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 and I've improved myself, right? So I would actually, if I saw that improvement, that's a big. Again, it doesn't guarantee placement, but if all you were missing was that little bit, it could be a way in. Anyway, I'll leave that there. No, that's not example questions. So you can see the conundrum I'm facing. So part of the reason I'm trying to do this is I have this ambition, have this vision of the kind of people I want. Firstly, I don't know if what I've described as an offering is enticing to people. I could just be, this is untested. I could be out of touch with the next generation of engineers. So I need to put this out there, put it into practice, and then see what the feedback is. So that's part of what this is. It's kind of I need the reps, need the feedback loops to then be able to adjust and course correct. Right. This whole concept of building our team using experienced people and graduates might not be viable, but it's something which you want to explore. So the challenge now is, all right, I've put this interview slot, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever it was. Now, how do you assess these skills in such a short period of time? So that's the muscle which I need to build. So again, through reps, through meeting people, through trying different questions, I need to try to assess if you guys are sort of, hitting the targets. But by the same token, this is your chance to flex your critical thinking skills. And I've explained to the rules of the game. I've explained to you how to win the game. Now, how do you best position yourself to score the right points and tick the right boxes? So the power is yours. All right. One example question I thought of was to provide a list of 5 to 10 things you've built at any point in your life. And generally, any questions I ask, I try to answer them myself. And this one was quite challenging. And I did come up with a list of 10 things, but I tried to make them as diverse as possible. So rather than just like saying, oh, I built, and I did some woodwork, and I built a chair, then I built a table, then I built I don't know, whatever it is. So rather than just doing the same thing over and over, I tried to a bit of a different range of things. And I'd appreciate if you guys can do the same. So the idea here is I believe anyone who, so this role is for to work in the construction industry, right? So you need to understand how things are built. You need to understand the attention to detail, because we're no longer in the design phase. We're now in the detailed construction phase. So every little detail matters. So you need to appreciate those things. And I think for you to really appreciate those things, you need to have some sort of experience with building things. And it's better if that experience has come naturally, because you're naturally inclined to enjoy those kind of things. No one's forced you to build anything. Hence why I think this is a good question. I could be wrong. So provide a list of 10 things, 5 to 10 things which you've built at any point in your life. And then provide that list. I'll give it to me at the interview. I'll have a quick scan, and anything that jumps out or interesting, I might ask you more questions on it. And the idea being, I'll be looking for things like self-drive, critical thinking, problem solving, attention to detail, resilience, innovation, hard working, quick learner, striving for excellence, and also your communication, I suppose, in how you describe what the project was involved. And tailoring that to sort of the level of engagement that I give you back. So that's one of the questions which I want to try, which could be a betting one. There might be some more like sort of critical thinking type things, which, how do you address? I think one I heard a while ago is like, oh, how tall is this building? It might be 20 stories. So just to see how you work through the, through the problem. Not that you need to know specifics, but just to see how your mind thinks. Well, I'm giving that one away. Not gonna be surprised anymore. Anyway, I'll stop there. So that's one. What else did I have? Bonus. What was this? I think I've talked about this before. So when hiring graduates, it is effectively a gamble on how likely they are to be successful in a given role, since they have no industry experience or track record, which is specific to the role. So we're looking for things like, all right, he's done well in this, so he might do well in this. So we're, in some ways, it's a lot of bias and a bias towards. And I've made a lot of mistakes in the past when I've hired people thinking, I don't know, you ask them a question, they say, I've worked on this $10 million project. And rather than probing and asking deeper questions, I've gone into my repository and said, all right, when did I last do a $10 million project? What was involved? This, and this. Oh, okay, so they must have done that. Not realizing, hang on, were they just the cleaner, or were they just the, pushing paper and then actually do the design? So it's very difficult to sort of interview people. Well, it's not a skill that I've developed, at least at the time of recording. So anyway, I digress again. We usually rely on looking for clues, elements we are assuming are indicators of high performance. So, for example, if we're looking for someone who strives for excellence, they should have a wake of excellent achievements in their recent past. So by wake, I mean like on a speedboat, that sort of past. Anyway, so excellence. So someone, for example, an example would be someone with a very high ATAR, like 98, 99, 99.99. You can see that's someone who's striving for excellence to get the best or squeeze the last bit of juice out of something, or if they've mastered a very difficult skill, or if they compete at the elite level in some sort of sport, tennis or soccer or whatever it might be, cricket. So those are sort of clues that this person is someone who strives for excellence. That's what we're looking out for. What else do we have? Yep. So not everyone's going to have those clues, and sometimes I look back at myself, and I think I had a lot of things, but there was things I was missing. And I always ask myself, if I interviewed myself the way I was back then, would I give myself a job? And sometimes the answer is no. So it's not, you got to be careful not to just write people off. So what I've written here is, if you don't have a strong track record to showcase at an interview with all these little skills and things that I've talked about, it's never too late to build one, right? So if you're still very keen, if you think what I've described here is exactly what you want, the opportunity you're looking for, if you think this is where you'll thrive, then I would suggest that you find a path. Well, what I'm suggesting here is one potential path to prove those skills. And as mentioned, one of the things we're looking for is for people to master the use of Revit software. The software is quite complex and difficult to use. There are a lot of challenges in learning how to use it. So one thing I've written here is, if you can teach yourself that in, say, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, not just fundamentals, mastery, it's going to require a lot of dedication, a lot of effort, a lot of potentially sacrifice. That could be a pathway. Again, not guaranteed, but I just thought I'd show for people who might not necessarily have the history of, um, you know, ticking all these boxes naturally. This is a more job-specific skill which we're looking for. And look, I'll tell you this: if you take the time to learn this, I'm happy to do a second interview. And even if you don't make the cut for exactly what we're looking for that level of intensity or high performance, I won't hesitate to pass on your details to people in my network, because this is definitely a highly sought after skill in our industry. So anyway, there's that. There's also our skills matrix. I put up a post a while ago on LinkedIn where we were sharing that publicly, so I'll leave that to you if you want to dig that one out. So yeah, I'll leave it there. All right, I think that was the last slide. Thank you. It's a good hour and 15 if you watched the end. Probably should put like an Easter egg or something in here. Maybe type in code, I don't know. Maybe type your name backwards or something. Then I know that you put your last name backwards. Then I know you got to the end. Didn't skim through. Although I need to put the Easter egg somewhere in the middle. Otherwise you can just scroll to the end. Anyway, all right, thank you. You can see how if I did this at the start of every interview, I would very quickly run out of energy and our little time slot would be wasted. But hopefully, as mentioned, I know it's a little bit impersonal watching a recording, but hopefully you've got a sneak peek into my personality, a bit of what the company is about, what we're trying to achieve, and we look forward to having a chat with you. So yeah, I'd say the way that process would work, again, I think with the slots I've created on my calendar, I'm expecting maybe a 10% success rate or pass rate to the next stage. And the next stage I haven't quite thought through, but it'll probably be meeting with Ivan, the other director, or potentially some other guys on the team, or maybe like a group interview, or I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about the next step. So this is just taking action one thing at a time, and we'll figure out the rest as we go along. All right, thanks for your time. I'll leave it there. Hopefully this recording actually works.